Welcome back to the program. So we've got great news to start with for this Friday night, and that is that George Santos has been let out of prison. That's right, President Trump has commuted his sentence. Now, George Santos was a New York congressman, number one. Number two, he basically got into Congress for all intents and purposes on untruthful information. He lied about his resume. He lied about a lot of different things. He wasn't necessarily a Rhodes Scholar by any stretch, but he also wasn't a criminal, and he certainly didn't deserve to be locked in a prison cell, sometimes even in solitary confinement, for up to 7 years. So thankfully, President Trump has let him out of jail. So this was just breaking right now, and so I want to just kind of read you President Trump's statement. George Santos was somewhat of a rogue, but there are many rogues throughout our country that aren't forced to serve 7 years in prison. I started to think about George when the subject of Democrat Senator Richard Da Nang Dick Blumenthal came up. As everyone remembers, Da Nang Dick stated for almost 20 years that he was a proud Vietnam veteran, having endured the worst of the war. Watching the wounded and all the dead as he raced up the hills and down into the valleys, blood streaming from his face, he was a, quote, great hero. He would leak to any and all who would listen. And then it happened. He was a complete and total phony, fraud, and liar. He never went to Vietnam. He never saw Vietnam. He never experienced any of the battles there or anywhere else. His war hero status and even minimal service in our military was totally and completely made up, President Trump said. This is far worse than what George Santos did. And at least Santos had the courage, conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. George has been in solitary confinement for long stretches of time and by all accounts has been horribly mistreated. Therefore, I am signing a commutation today, releasing George Santos from prison immediately. Good luck, George, and have a great life. That's what President Trump just put out. Now, before I get into anything else, isn't it interesting that it's always Democrats that lie about their service? Why is that? I mean, John Kerry lied, right? Swift Boat Veterans for Truth. He lied about everything in Vietnam. And then he was so disgusting, he actually went against his own troops and testified in front of Congress on things that didn't happen. Okay? And then they called him a war hero. And then, of course, you have Tampon Timmy. Tampon Timmy, stolen valor, lied about his services as well. You've got, of course, Da Nang Dick that lied about his service in Vietnam. And it's like, it's one right after another. It's always Democrats that, for whatever reason, like to lie about their services. So I'm glad to see that he's going to be released immediately. He deserves his freedom. And this brings me to something else. Could Tina Peters be next to follow? Well, I want to give you some information that was breaking just the other day. So apparently they've been in a process of appealing her convictions, and we all know that what she did was not a crime. All she did was basically save the documentation and the forensic evidence that the elections were stolen in Mesa County, Colorado. She's a hero. She's a patriot. I had a chance to sit down and interview her only weeks, maybe a month before they locked her up, and I told her right to her face what a brave soul that she was, and we're praying for you, and we hope that you get out of jail. Now, we also know the Department of Justice enjoined this case, and they have been filing their own proceedings. But remember, they can't do what they just did to George Santos. Why? Well, because it was a state conviction, and so therefore there is no jurisdiction. President Trump would have already pardoned her if he could. So the people that are saying, pardon her, well, sorry, but she can't be pardoned. But that doesn't mean that the Department of Justice can't put pressure on the case and examine it further, and that's exactly what they have been doing. So Tina Peters recently, October 16th, so just yesterday, had a hearing, and it was in front of a Judge Scott Varholak, Varholak. And from what was said during this, it sounds as though it's a possibility that she might be released, and pretty soon. So let's talk about this. Tina Peters' case was an effort to portray her as an absolute criminal. This was not true, of course. Tina had never been arrested before and, of course, was doing her job as the Mesa County clerk in early 2021 by saving the records of the election according to law. That's what she was supposed to do. But, of course, because they stole Colorado and they stole all these other states, they went after her. And the judge, this real scumbag judge, this Barrett, he shows his bias clearly. He said to her before sentencing her, "What judge do you know ever say this? You are a charlatan." He called her a charlatan. "And you cannot help but lie as easy as it is for you to breathe." Wow, those are sharp words from an actual judge. Unreal. "You betrayed your oath for no one other than yourself. And this is what makes you, Miss Peters, such a danger to our community." Imagine that. It's the position that you held that has provided you this pulpit from which you can spew these lies, the undermining of our democratic process, the undermining of our belief and confidence in our election systems. And then this is where he's getting in trouble. "The damage that you have caused and continue to cause is just as bad, if not worse, than physical violence." Let's repeat that. You have a judge who is sentencing someone and rattling off all this lies and bullshit about this person, this defendant, and literally says that your words, your freedom of speech, your right to your own opinion, your right to say whatever you want to say without screaming, fire in a movie theater or incitement to violence, just your words are just as bad, if not worse, than the physical violence that this court sees on an all too regular basis. Well, the judge that is now in charge of this and is taking a look at this is a magistrate judge in Colorado, and now it's in front of him, and this is what the judge says. Judge Barrett claimed, this is the judge talking about this other judge, claimed that her speech was, quote, just as bad, if not worse, than the physical violence his court sees on an all too regular basis. Yet, he offers zero substantiation for this claim. Additionally, history has shown that zero violence ever resulted from the information put forward by Miss Tina Peters. Her entire history is all contained on her website, tinapeters.us. So the judge that's looking at this case actually went to her website, which has no violence, there's no incitement to violence, and has nothing but facts and truth, things that liberals can't stand. Too bad for the prosecution that Tina's disclosures occurred after January 6, 2021, because they would have likely blamed that violence on her as well. While Judge Varhalak didn't allow the Venezuelan testimony from the actual programmers who claimed to have written the software to cheat in those elections in Colorado during yesterday's hearing, we now know that Smartmatic, which is tied to Venezuela, which I talked about in 2019, which I put out that video, and I said this is the video that basically got me thrown off of YouTube, right? I lost both my channels, and that video had 989,000 views in less than 36 hours. Why? Because I was showing votes being switched live on CNN. That's why. Well, so now it looks as though this judge is going to take this and take a closer look at this, and it's a good possibility that he's going to rule in favor of letting her out of jail. Now, the reason I say that is because, yes, he was appointed by a Democrat governor, but not the psychotic Marxist weirdo freak, George, whatever his name is, Polson or whatever he is, right now that they have. Pokin, I think, or whatever his name is. It was the other guy, Hickenlooper. Now, when Hickenlooper ran in Colorado at the time, he was considered a moderate. Not that there's really such thing as a moderate Democrat anymore, but at least at that point, he was considered more of a moderate. Well, this United States District Court judge, on his main page, Scott Varhalok, it says, our mission is to serve the public by providing a fair and impartial forum that ensures equal access to justice in accordance with the rule of law and protects the rights and liberties of all persons and resolves cases in a timely and efficient manner. That is the mission statement on this judge and on this judge's website. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this judge, hopefully in the next week or two, is going to let Tina Peters out of jail. God loves, so let's hope so. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.